Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel Coding Guru, your go-to channel for all the things tech and coding. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out our all latest videos. Today we are diving into one of the most fundamental process that makes our Android device come to life. That is the booting process. Ever wondered what happens when you press that power button on your phone? Well, in this video we are going to break it down step by step and see how Android gets up and running. Let's get started. Alright, the Android booting process might seem like a simple on-off cycle, but it actually a series of complex steps. Let's break them down. So let's go step by step. So you can see there are total 6 steps over here. So the first step is power on. When you press the power button, the first thing that happens is your device hardware begins to wake up. This includes processor, memory, various essential components like initial spark that powers everything on your phone. So basically what happens is, see, when you press that power button, there is something called PMIC, means Power Management Integrated Circuit. So what does this do? This will supply the power to all the hardware to check whether all of the hardware is proper or not. If it is proper, then it will go for the next step. So what happens next? The first step, see here we have given the first step as boot ROM or which is nothing but powering on. Okay, so what exactly happens here is there is a small piece of code that is hardware. Like when the power is on, the power is supplied to the hardware, and there is one small piece of code which is present in one part of your read-only memory. So what does this code do? This code loads this step 2, which is bootloader. It loads the bootloader code. So let's see what is this bootloader. Once the hardware kicks in, the bootloader takes over. Think of bootloader as gatekeeper. It checks whether the system is valid, authenticates your phone, and ensures that everything is secure before proceeding. The bootloader runs the first piece of code that start Android operating system. So up to these two steps, right? The Android operating system is not yet loaded. All the prerequisite codes or all the prerequisite environment is set in these two steps, that is boot ROM and bootloader. So now let's go for step 3, which is kernel. So many of you might be knowing kernel. You might have worked on Linux kernel, or you might have heard about it. So even Android, as in the first video I was explaining about this architecture, right? There I was explaining about this Linux kernel. So Android is built upon this Linux kernel. Okay. So in step 3, the kernel is the core of your device operating system. It controls everything from the hardware interaction to managing resource. After the bootloader, the kernel gets loaded into memory and starts interacting with your device hardware to prepare it for the Android OS. Means, see, in step 3, what exactly it does is it loads all the drivers that is related for your hardware, and it will load this root directory. Root directory in the sense the first directory that is required for loading your Android OS. And also this kernel is responsible for managing all this process scheduling, memory management. See, everything is done by this kernel. Okay, so that is why kernel is called as the heart or core of your Android operating system. So once kernel does all these things, it handovers to the next step, that is init. So I can say this init, right? It is the grandfather of the all process. Means this is the first user process that starts running whenever your Android is getting up. So I can say init as the grandfather of all process. All the other process runs after once this init is done. So init process takes over this when Android operating system comes to life. Means, as I said, kernel is like loading all the hardware dependent driver, everything, making everything environment set. Once every environment is set, this init process starts running. This is the first process where the Android OS comes to life. The init process reads the configurations files and starts the service needed for the system to function. Means, see, init process has two important tasks. What is that two important tasks? One is init process starts or mounts the file structures like sys proc or dev. What is this sys proc or dev? See, these are all the lower level file systems which is mainly required for providing your kernel API to this user space. In the sense, see, you are having a driver. For example, let me take as real-time clock. Like this real-time clock driver, right? It will like take the time, calculate the time up to which your Android device is up. Okay, so if you want to get that value, right, then you can go for this sysproc or dev. It will be anywhere in this, and you can get that API from there. So it is basically giving user the kernel API so that you can use that for your applications or any services. So once init load all these directories, mounts all these directories, right? Next init does second task. There is something called init RC. RC means it is a script file which will be having the details of service that needs to be run during the boot process so that Android device comes to life. So init runs this file, init checks which and all process that service that needs to be up. So it will make sure all these services are up in this stage. Okay. So once init does all these things, right? Next comes this zygote. See, as I said, kernel, once kernel is done, kernel loads this first process init, init loads all these services, and also this daemon services comes into picture. Next comes this zygote. What is this zygote? This step is bit technical, but stay with me. The zygote is special process that handles creating apps and services on your Android device. It is responsible for launching all other processes on the system, like an app factory. It ensures that app and service run smoothly by routing the shared resources. Means, see, I was telling init was the first process that runs on this Android OS. It is the grandfather of the process, but I can say this zygote as the father of all the system services or all the processes. So why I am saying that? Because see, once init is done, say now you want to run this application. There are some high level Java services that we need to run. Okay, for example, activity manager, window manager, power manager. So what does all this manager? These are all basically an high level Android services. Okay, they are required for maintaining the life cycle of your Android, and to if you want to display anything on the window, then you need this window manager which manages that process. Or if you want to maintain something related to power, then there is called power manager. So all these things are done by this high level Java services. So who starts them? Zygote is the special service which forks itself. Means zygote is having all the core libraries, Java libraries, that is required to run these Java services. Okay, so what does this zygote do? Zygote forks itself. You know, right? Fork means it is like if you are having process A, if process A forks itself, there will be a child process created for that. This child process will be having the property of process A, which is nothing but its father. So same way, zygote forks itself and zygote creates all these processes. Next, these services, right, it will be having properties of the zygote. Why that is required? See, the basic idea here is, for example, you think you run one application, so you want to allocate some basic resources, some Java libraries that is required for running that application. So think you are running 10 application, every now and then you can't allocate resource separately, right? So there will be this zygote who will be having that resource, he will fork himself. So that process, right, that process will be used for that particular app, so that there will be a sharing of resource between these instances. So that is why this zygote comes into picture. Okay, so that is all about the zygote, and we know that once zygote is up, then it starts Dalvik virtual machine. What you know that Dalvik virtual machine is an Android runtime which is provided for converting your app bytecode into this machine code, so that it is basically a compiler which converts your app code into this machine code, so that app runs on this Android OS. Even this zygote is forked by even this Dalvik virtual machine is forked by zygote. Okay, next zygote, as I said, zygote start all the system server. Zygote starts system server. Okay, this system server starts this managers, which is nothing but services. Okay, so that is about this stage 5, which is zygote. Okay, next comes stage 6, which is system UI. So that is not present here, but there is also, as we said, this service manager. That is all stage 6. Okay, that is called system UI and launchers. Okay, finally the system UI and launchers are loaded when you see a familiar lock screen. Like once you see this lock screen on your Android device, right, that is when your Android booting is completed, means home application is launched. So basically, right, you see this Android image popping up, there will be an Android icon going here and there. That basically comes in this init process. Okay, once this init is done, that means up to there all this booting process like boot ROM loader or kernel is loaded. Once kernel space is ready, once user space or first process runs, right, you see that image popping up. So that is where this init process runs, and once everything is done, you can see this home launcher. That is basically all the apps are loaded into your Android OS. So that is where this booting process completes. Okay. So booting process is very, very, very important in case if you are going for any interviews, that is for this Android. So the first question they ask is explain booting process. So you have to know all these steps and what exactly happens in which step. So that is very much for us to know. So this is how Android phone or Android OS comes into life. So I hope now you all know how exactly this Android booting process gets up in our Android phones. So that is all about in this video. Thank you. So please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Thank you. Stay tuned for next video on this Android. Thank you.